What did Sun Wukong do after completing the journey to the West? This is a question that almost everyone has wondered about. No matter what year we were born, most of us encountered and loved Sun Wukong during our childhood. So naturally, many people want to know what happened after he completed the great mission of obtaining the scriptures. Whether he is a legend or a fictional character, Sun Wukong had such a strong influence on us that he feels almost real. That's why everyone wants to know what he did afterward. The only difference is that some people are a little curious, while others are extremely curious. I belong to the second group. Since I was a huge fan of Wukong as a child, I started searching for information about him as soon as I gained access to the internet. Most versions of the story simply end after the scriptures are obtained. However, some stories continue beyond that point. There are many different versions and interpretations. Some are quite bizarre, while others are fairly believable. Before talking about those stories, let's briefly look back at Wukong's past to build some momentum. Wukong was born from a stone. Because he feared death, he trained himself to become immortal. Through celestial medicines and magical peaches, he became so powerful that even the entire heavenly court could not control him. However, Buddha imprisoned him beneath the Five Elements mountain for 500 years, and eventually he became part of the journey to obtain the scriptures. Many say that after those 500 years of imprisonment, Wukong's power decreased significantly, perhaps by as much as 500 times. That idea actually makes some sense. During his rebellious days, Wukong could defeat hundreds of thousands of heavenly soldiers without losing. Yet during the pilgrimage, he often struggled against demons that were far weaker than the gods, and sometimes the gods themselves had to come down and help him. So the claim that his power was greatly reduced seems reasonable. Now, let's talk about the different stories of Wukong's life after the pilgrimage. The first story says that after the scriptures were delivered, Tang Sanzang returned to his homeland. Wukong, Zhu Beiji, Sha Wujing, and the White Dragon Horse suddenly found themselves with nothing to do. As a result, the Jade Emperor appointed Wukong, Beiji, and Wujing as celestial officials in heaven. The dragon returned to his own kingdom and, after more than 1,000 years, eventually became a dragon king. Wukong spent his days wandering heaven as a powerful celestial being. Over time, influenced by the heavenly palaces and divine energy, he gradually regained his original powers. However, by then he had matured and no longer caused trouble. Whenever he felt bored, he would descend to the mortal world and help humans and monkeys alike. Another story is more of a fan theory or fan fiction. In this version, Wukong actually died before he ever completed the pilgrimage. Wukong was never someone who could sit still. His mind was always active. After being imprisoned for 500 years, he became deeply depressed. Eventually, unable to endure it any longer, he chose to stop his own immortal life force. Because he was immortal, killing himself was not simple. He could not die by biting his tongue or smashing his head against a wall. Instead, he gathered all of his life force into one point within his body and released it in a massive explosion. The explosion was so powerful that even his physical body was destroyed down to the atomic level. Yet his soul survived. Most of his life force scattered throughout the world, but because Buddha's mountain still restrained him, not all of it could escape. The remaining life force beneath the mountain eventually formed a new body and reclaimed Sun Wukong's soul, causing him to be reborn. This process took hundreds of years. For Wukong, however, it felt like the blink of an eye. He believed his suicide attempt had simply failed and that he had briefly lost consciousness. He never realized that centuries had passed while a new body was being formed. Nor did he realize that most of his life force had already been lost. Throughout the pilgrimage, he continued to believe he was the original Sun Wukong. After completing the journey, he attained a form of enlightenment and finally understood the truth that he had once died. The source I read was in English, so I'm not sure exactly what kind of enlightenment it referred to. After learning the truth, Wukong withdrew from the world and lived as a monk, quietly waiting for the day of his final death. The next story returns to some elements of the first one. In this version, Wukong becomes a powerful celestial being in heaven. But after a long time, he becomes unhappy there and returns to the mortal world to rule as the Monkey King once more. This story never specifies whether he regained his original powers. Although Wukong is immortal, the other monkeys are not. He is forced to watch those he cares about die again and again. Over time, this becomes unbearable. He also falls in love with a female spirit, but she too eventually dies. Wukong can no longer endure the pain of losing those he loves. The immortality he once desired so desperately begins to feel like a curse. To avoid becoming attached to anyone ever again, he isolates himself in a cave. Having grown tired of life itself, he begins to reject his immortality and slowly ages. Eventually, both his body and soul fade away. This is not ordinary death, nor is it the death of a god. In ordinary death, the soul continues to exist. But Wukong's body and soul both disappear completely. It resembles the concept of nirvana. Whatever the case, he finally finds the peace he deserves. Personally, this is one of the endings that satisfies me the most. He achieves the immortality he always wanted. The fans get the story they hoped for. And in the end, he finally receives the peace and rest that he truly deserves.